welcome everyone, which we just did. So today is the art and science of decision making. This was a really fun session and a really interesting session. And what I loved about this, and I don't want to do any spoiler alerts for those that haven't seen it yet, but I love the science part of this because I'm such a data nerd that I love the fact that there's like a component to it that allows you to crunch the numbers when you're making decisions, which is really cool. So can't wait for that piece. So Liz, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Liz Scott, and I get to hang out with Heather on Tuesdays, which is super fun. And today I'm super stoked about this whole decision-making process because there's constantly decisions that we have to make in our firm. And as a firm owner, the thing that we're constantly doing is evaluating apps, we're evaluating workflows, we're evaluating what's most important. So this is definitely going to be something that I'm going to want to apply to my own practice and my own life.
Definitely. And I'm Heather Satterley. For those of you that I may not have met, I am a CPA and I'm also the Director of Education and Media at Woodard. So I joined the Woodard team last year, and I am in charge of all things content over there as far as the articles that are on the Woodard report and the content that's going to be delivered at our Scaling New Heights conference. It's coming up in June. I hope all of you will join us. It's going to be amazing. Liz and I will be there. Ian, you're going to be there, right?
It's still TBD. I might be doing a half Ironman race, so we'll see.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So, well, hopefully we'll get you over there. So excited for that. We've got a lot of fun stuff planned. And I am a tech tinkerer. I love technology, love, and I'm still doing tons of technology stuff over at Woodard. So I haven't stopped that. I've actually built 2 apps since I've been there, which is really fun. And it's just been a really fun ride. Really enjoying that. So that's me. And Ian, there you are. I'm going to flip ahead to your presenter slide. So I'm going to give you the introduction because I love introducing you, Ian. So Ian is the co-founder and chief partnerships officer at Carbon. Ian's also a very dear friend of mine. He actually was my mentor when I went out on the road for the very first time as a speaker in this space. And he was very gracious in being an amazing mentor. And we did that for what, about 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, we did those road shows. It would be 3 to 4 months in length, and we did 4 of them. So
we did a lot.
I think you were part of 3 of them. So you never get to know somebody until you're on the road going from city to city, 3 cities over 3 days. You get to really appreciate somebody that's got your back while you're out there.
Totally. And Ian was the guy. He was the guy that listened to me and helped me to take the leap out onto my own way back when and actually go out and start Saturday Trading Consulting. So I will always adore you, Ian. Thank you so much for being with us today. So Ian, what else? Tell me, I know you have you spent quite a bit of time at Intuit. You were also over at Xero. Tell us a little more about your story.
Where some of the content comes today is I'm an industrial engineer by trade. So I'm a numbers weenie. I love optimization stuff. So I did supply chain consulting for almost 5-7 years before I got into the accounting profession. So when I came out of grad school, I went to Intuit, worked there for 10 years on every product of Intuit minus TurboTax. But I got to see the Pro Advisor program. That was one of my last things, and the accountant side, and really fell in love with the profession. And that's what carried me to Xero, where I was there for leading the US operation for 3.5 years. And then we started Carbon almost 9 years ago now, in 2014. So time flies. And so and again, I've been pretty blessed by being able to work with many of the folks here on the actual chat that I see, as well as all those that might listen. So it's good to see you all, and thanks for taking the time to spend it with myself, Heather, and Liz, because we're gonna have a ball. That's the whole
we are so gonna have a ball. And I think this is the first time that we've done something super interactive on Happy Hour, unless it was like a party. Like we do interactive things like during our New Year's Eve party, and we've had a couple of other cocktail parties where we play games, but this is the first time we're actually having full-blown audience participation. And what I'm going to do is, while you're presenting, Ian, I'm going to go over on Facebook to see whoever's joining us there so they can kind of vote in the polls too. We won't be
Yep.
able to crunch the numbers. It won't be included in that percentage that we see behind the scenes in the polls, but at least I can chime in. So.
Yep. Two things.
Awesome.
One is you guys got to give me sharing responsibilities. Otherwise, I can't share my presentation. Second of all, this is also interactive for you and Liz. So Heather and Liz, you're going to jump in. And one of you is going to act like the person on the chat with the question that we come up with on the first polling question. So, or the chat question. So let me try again if I can do this. Oh, there we go. Sharing is caring.
Yes, it is.
Can you guys
100%.
all see my screen?
Yes, it looks great.
Perfect. I cannot see you, so if you guys wave at me, I have no idea. So just to chime on top. So we're going to talk about the art and science of decision making, and there are really two different parts of this particular discussion. And the second half is going to be super interactive, and the first half is going to be partially interactive. So we'll get to what that means. We already did the introductions. You guys all know who I am. I do work at a company called Carbon. If you want to learn more about Carbon, it's practice management for the connected firm. It brings everything together. You can learn about it at carbonhq.com. That is it that we're going to talk about Carbon. Okay. We're going to talk about decision making, so forth. So when we did this, we had some learning objectives. For those of you who want CPE, sorry, I'm not here for that, but we do have our learning objectives and purpose. We're going to break these things down in two different ways of looking at it. And that's why we called it the art and the science. In decision making, there's some decisions that you make that have to go by emotion and feel, and there's not necessarily a right answer. It's the best answer for the situation that you have. And there's many different ways you might view that. And it's about helping yourself get to that sense of clarity so that you feel like you've made the best choice and you can continue to drive down towards that. And that's what we're going to talk about with the art. The second piece is really around the science. These are things that, Heather was talking about. And Liz, you mentioned, looking for maybe your best app. It might be looking for, in my example, I'm going to use the best car that I had to get from my in-laws. It's usually a defined answer that you can take what is typically thought of as a qualitative decision, but we can make it quantitative in order to help us solve it. And that's kind of the two different sides of the coin. So in the example I did at Happy Hour Camp, I'm not going to be able to do justice to that one here, but I'll give a summary of what it was. In my situation here, the art decision that I was struggling with was when my daughter was really young, probably when she was just about 1 year old, she had her finger severed in a stroller. It cut off a good portion of her thumb. So that's what I talked about when I was at Happy Hour Camp. And the question I really had at that point was, how do I move forward? What is the best thing for her? And there's a lot of things that I had to take into account. And I had to work with somebody just like Liz and Heather, how we've talked about different things between ourselves on some of the decisions that you have to make that are really large decisions that don't necessarily have clarity. So you're trying to bounce things off of people and you're trying to get someone to help you talk through that. And so on that particular situation, it was a matter of deciding, do I go after legal? Do I, what do I do for the healthcare? What is the long-term impact? How do I minimize that? How do I deal with the psychological components? And, it was, for me, it was, the decision was really around litigation. And the litigation was one that I wanted to keep in reserve because it wasn't necessarily about making money. It was about preserving the long-term health. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I got offered a couple grand for the whole incident. And the couple grand is not worth the long-term impact. And so that was kind of that decision. The one here that I put on the 2020 one was my parents. They're both in their 80s. And they had to make a decision of which long-term care facility they go into. And there's a lot of intangibles in that. And so it's not as simple or it's not as much on the science side as it is more of emotion and feel. Now, the flip of that was, I just got my in-laws a brand new car. I had gotten my parents one, and now I had to get my in-laws one. And my father-in-law had certain requirements that he had. And so it was understanding the requirements. It was understanding the importance. It was in understanding how all the things measured up. And you can actually think about it in terms of, and we'll see, it's similar to how you might see Consumer Reports do a decision. And so there's many of those things that you will face for your business. Long story short on that one, we ended up getting his car a couple weeks ago. It's actually the Cadillac Lyric, which you may have seen ads for. So we're one of the first ones to get that. And so he is driving around in that right now, and he's very happy at 81, driving around with that brand new car. So those are the two decisions. Anything, Liz, Heather, you guys want to chime in before we go into how we approach these?
I like that you're pulling in that this decision-making approach can be used for personal life and business, because really and truly, one of the things that you're saying here is art and science. For me, I feel this is emotion, and part of that is part of what weighs a decision oftentimes. So it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I'm getting to hear this again.
No, me too. And I remember Marriott Martinez, who was at Appy Camp, she actually had raised her hand at camp and said that she thought that it could have been called heart and science because of that, because it isn't emotional. Every decision, has some degree of emotion to it. So for sure.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, we're human, right? And so not necessarily the optimal is not necessarily just the numbers, right? And so emotion plays a part. And sometimes you'll take something that's less on the number in order for it to be fitting some other things that are outside of that. So again, they all kind of interweave together, but we wanted to break them apart just so you could see them in contrast. Hence the colors. So I wanted to put this up here. So we want to go in the art, and Heather and Liz, we're going to try this out. And we're gonna try to do the same sort of exercise that we did at Happy Hour Camp, which is to bring one of those questions to bear. So what I want to do here is I want to put a chat question out there, because that's gonna be the easy way to get the feedback back. And so I might have to, or you might have access to it, Heather, to copy and paste this in. But what I'd love to be able to get is from all of you that are here live, what's the big decision that you're facing right now? That you, if you had a chance, could sit with someone like myself or the team here to really talk through. And we'll try to do justice with that here. It's not the polling question. This one's separate, guys. Or the polling just showed up for me. Whoops. And so what we're going to do here is just kind of understand what that might be. So go ahead and put in the chat maybe what that is. Part of the thing with decision making, and part of this part of the aspect of it is the realization of what is the question that you have, what is the problem that you're facing, because once you can get that written down, then you can find others that can help you talk through it. So Heather's just put that in the chat. I'm going to go ahead while you all think about that and get comfortable with that question. I'm going to go through and talk through how we're going to approach it. And then we're going to do some back and forth and show how it's done, so that not only can you help somebody else go through this process, but that you can, when you go through the process, just help yourself think through, how am I going to get all the details I need? So what's interesting here is that the art of decision-making really rests on something you all are super familiar with. When you're dealing with getting a prospect through the door, you usually run a discovery meeting. And that discovery meeting has the same components of the art of decision-making. And so I put up a list of things here on what a usual discovery meeting might entail. And really, when it comes down to what we're doing here, it's the middle part of the process. It's that discovery, ideation, and solving part that happens before we start selling the engagement. And that's how we're approaching what we're going to be doing in this 10 steps to assist in decision-making. And so again, here you can see listening, which is a key component, determining the root cause, evaluating the scope, retelling what you've heard, and determining success. So what do those 10 steps actually look like in this part of the art? And the biggest thing is, and Heather, you and I went through this exercise together before Happy Hour Camp. And you told me what the problem that you were facing was, and I sat there and listened. My wife jokes about this all the time because I rarely sit and listen. I feel like I'm always, speaking over somebody. But in this particular, when you're talking about the decision making, you're trying to let someone get out what they know, and it doesn't necessarily all make sense. And you need to get all those nuggets and pieces of information, and not only hear them, but help, in a lot of cases, understand what's the problem really. Because it's also probably confusing in the person's head that's talking about it. And so you're listening, you're trying to understand where exactly the root of it is. And as you're helping them, you're cataloging what is the problem space and what are all the things they've considered thus far. And you're also, again, this is usually done in person, but can be done virtually. You're trying to understand from facial cues, intonation, and other things, what their preferences are Because a lot of folks, when you're going through the process, have already made decisions. They just don't realize that they have. And so you're cataloging what are the different things that they've considered, what are the things that they've tried to do, and again, noting those inflections and whatnot for preferences. Then you need to start to help dig in a little bit deeper. So in the example that Heather and I were talking about, I didn't understand the full context of things. So I needed to be brought into that world, and I needed to ask probing questions to start to get to what was the background of it, what set up the scene, why is this a decision that's being faced, and why is it problematic, and what are the nuances of it. And that's when we start to probe and we dive down deeper into each one of these, trying to go down different pathways, what we call the 5 whys. And I'll show a slide on what the 5 whys are, but it's really a root cause analysis tool to be able to go down each one of those tracks of thinking so that we can be brought along the same journey. So you have another person on that decision-making process that can think about it differently. And so all of this that we're doing on steps 1 to 5 is really to get the discovery process done so that we, as someone assisting in the decision-making, can really come to the next step, which is to start to form our own hypothesis, understand our own sets of solutions that we might consider outside of the bounds that have been considered already, or still within those bounds, but maybe with a different perspective on it. And so we want to make sure that we ideate ourselves in conjunction with understanding the information that's given. Now, we don't communicate that. We are, again, trying to understand where all these things came together. And that leads us to our next segment of this overall, which is really on the solutions phase of this. And so, again, for everybody that's usually going through a hard decision-making process, they've come up with a set of solutions that might plausibly make sense. And your job then is to help them pressure test them. It's not to give them the answer. It's not to say it's right or wrong, but it's to help them discuss it and get it off their chest and understand why or why not it was a solution that they considered and what were the reasons for consideration or elimination, so that you can follow the logic and also maybe point holes that where maybe they hadn't thought about it in a way that maybe you, as someone coming from the outside, might. The next one is really to evaluate the facts that were given and the answers that are provided so that you can start to formulate your own recommendation of what you think might be the right path. Whatever the decision that you think is the right path is not the end decision, so just note that. And so you can only, at this point, once you've seen everything and insist, you can suggest a solution. And so you might suggest and say, you know what, I think option A might be one of the leading ones that you want to consider based on the information you're given. And what you're doing with that is you're probing and providing someone something to think about and allowing for them the space to think about it and respond. And you're trying to get them to talk through this process because it's not the solution that you suggested, it's the observation and how they communicated back, whether or not that's the right solution, and what the good, bad, and the ugly of that is. And so this is really meant to be an iterative process because once you've gone through that conversation, you will get new information. And then you go back to pressure test that, evaluate it, and suggest. And that loop that you go through is how you start to help the person get to a center point or an answer for themselves. We're not telling them what to do. We're just helping them to discuss it with somebody to help frame it so that they can ultimately get to what they think is the right path to go. They can have the consideration set of things that make it so that it seems like the best option for them. And then we can help talk through the next steps for them to ultimately get to a point where they can solve it. And so this is how we assist in decision-making. We do not make the decision. I want to make that really, really clear. But this is how we allow for someone to explore it end to end. So I'll take a break there. Liz, Heather, suggestions, questions, thoughts, things you guys experienced this firsthand?
Go ahead, Heather.
No, I love this. I love this. I love what you said about the listening and the asking questions, because I think it's easy for when you're talking to a client or helping them through a decision, it's easy to try and jump right to the solution. And when you do that without listening, you miss stuff. And so I think that's really important.
Well, and to repeat the process. So to call out that you're going to learn things along the way. So go back to now with the new information. Make that
yeah, and that's where this is one of the activities that actually takes quite a bit of time. It's not going to be a small, quick. These are generally not easy decisions. And so that iteration is really important. And that time and attentiveness, active listening, probing, and it may happen over multiple sessions too, as folks can walk away and decompress from it, but also think it through a bit more and then come back with another perspective that they didn't otherwise have.
Dina has a really good question, Ian. She says, this process makes perfect sense, but it's hard to remember the steps when you're in the moment with the client. And I totally relate to this because it is. We're problem solvers. That's what we do. So she's wondering if you have any tips on how to implement that when you're actually sitting with them and you're trying to stay focused and continue to ask the questions. Do you have any advice for that?
I would. So I'll go to the next slide. So I actually have a bunch of questions that I typically like to ask, and I put them in the order of the process that might exist. So I have something to refer to and use to not have to think as much around what am I going to ask, but knowing the order by which I might ask it. So these are the types of probing questions I might think about. Again, don't overthink it. It's actually relatively a simple, straightforward process. By the way, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a lot of wind where I'm at, and like it's super loud in here. So hopefully you don't hear the background noise. But just think of the situation as I need to understand what the heck's going on. That's one. Then it's about I need to check myself at the door, listen to what the person is saying, and ask questions that are really, really simple and really basic. And I will generally ask, with the information given, I will take that information and ask the question back to somebody. So all I'm doing is trying to get them to tell me as much information as I can. As they're giving me the information, I'm now thinking about what am I going to do with that in order for me to give the information back on the different pathways that they want to go with. And then I'm just going to probe on each one of those, and it will then ultimately come together. It's not necessarily as much as thinking about that process, as much as making sure that, and it was mentioned there, I think from Tiffany, it's the listening up front. There's always the adage of planning is, if you want to be successful in a project, planning is like 80% of the time. The same thing holds true here. The more you listen up front and you become one who's interested in the topic and interested in the background and interested where they've headed with the argument in their head, the more likely you will be able to spend that last 20% on what were the solutions and where to get them to. But it requires them to be able to get everything out so that they can hear themselves speak it, so that they can actually form their own opinions. And that's what you're doing. You're just a guide. You're not the seer or the person giving them the answer. Does that help?
I think it totally helps. And one of the things that you said is when you're listening, somebody's getting a chance to talk. So it's actually, a problem sounds different whenever you put words to it. And whenever it becomes verbal, it's like you start to see all of these possibilities that unfold whenever it's just this thought in your head. You just have that one angle.
It's 100% correct. To be truthful for everybody here, I typically, for myself personally, when I sleep at night, I will process things in my head. I will wake up in the morning, or I will woken up many times in the evening, and I will have cycled through whatever the problem is and thought about every possible scenario that exists. But until I'm able to speak to somebody else about it, they're just thoughts that don't have any construction, and they don't necessarily have me headed to the right direction. But when you verbalize things, it puts conviction to it, and it puts the onus of you to logically start to connect the dots. And that is a really quintessential part of the process. And that's why, again, this is an art process. And that's why, again, it's an engaged process. And it typically needs somebody that either your spouse or a friend or a colleague, crap, sometimes just be your dog. Dog won't say anything, but it's going to look at you and give you that sort of sense of listening. So again, think about that. Two things to put in here on the root cause. One of the techniques that we use would be it's the why. It's asking the 5 whys. And all you're doing is when somebody has something, you say, hey, the example I give here is very basic. It's a pipe breaks, there's water everywhere, what caused it? When you're doing this in the discovery process, you're asking someone like, why is that problem a big problem for you? And they give you, well, it's because of X, Y, and Z. All right, for Z, why did that materialize? Oh, because someone did this and that. Well, why would somebody do this or that? Well, it's because they're this particular way. Well, why are they this particular way? And you get to a point where they can't answer the why. And when you hit that bottom point, that's either the root cause or it was the question that preceded it that was the root cause. And so that's the 5 whys. It's very basic, but it's taking the information someone gave you, rewriting it into a question and sending it back with the why in front of it, and you ultimately get to that root cause. The last one I want to leave you guys with is the keys to success. So I'll let you all read this, but this is the summary of how it all kind of comes together. The ones that I think are really important here is the first one, listen that we talked about. Reframing the question was what we talked about in the 5 whys. Learn the outcomes prior to adding your own. Again, it's not about you. It's never about you. You illuminate the decision, they make it. You have to always remember that. You're just a guide. So what I want to do here is just do a simple little exercise here where we're going to try this out. Now, you all have been so gracious in the chat. I didn't read the chat, Heather and Liz. So what was one of the questions that came up either repeatedly or was a really interesting one someone said that we're going to scrimmage?
So there was hiring.
Okay.
Actually, when did, should I hire? Should I outsource? That was one that we saw a bunch. We also saw time. So how much time should I spend? How much time should I spend on my business versus in my business? Let's see.
So let's do this. Let's pick outsourcing. It's interesting because we used outsourcing as one for the science at Happy Hour Camp, but we can actually take the same one and use it for art.
But for art, so the polls, is this the polls? Because the polls are.
No, this is not the polls.
Okay,
so
good.
Guys,
all right.
You all are going to work with me here, okay?
Okay, got it.
Heather and Liz, you are my 2 decision makers. You're the ones making the decision. I'm just trying to understand it. And so the question you guys have just asked me is, should I outsource part of my practice today, or should I continue going the way I'm going, or maybe should I evaluate sometime in the future? So that would be the way the question might come up. And I would come back and say, well, why are you thinking that you need to outsource? What caused you to have this epiphany or this rationalization that you need to make this decision? So we're gonna play this out, okay? So Heather, why would you decide that?
So I'm gonna actually throw this over to Liz because she actually did this. Like she went through this decision. So I feel like she can answer where she was. And I think that would be real, right, Liz?
It'd be super real. And I even feel like it relates to a lot of the questions that people were posing. So why am I considering outsourcing my firm if that's the place that we're beginning? And I think that being able to hire, so finding people that understood the process. One of the things that I attempted to do was to pull in several different people that were good at one thing. But then what I found was I had this firm of all of these people, and did I have enough client work to support all of that? Because like some of the comments over in chat, what I'm seeing is, how do you hire somebody that's able to do all of these tasks? Well, the answer to that is not everybody's going to be able to. And I don't think that everybody has that superhuman ability. So that would be the place to begin is hiring issues.
So Liz, question for you. What was the situation different now than it was several years ago? And why was hiring important? Was it for you to possibly get more free time for yourself? Was it trying to drive more profitability? Was it be able to take on more clients? Was it all those things? What was the impetus of the hiring?
For me, I wanted to be able to focus in other areas. So the time that was spent in, adding bank feeds, reconciling, all of those activities, I wanted my team to be able to spend time in other places. And the tasks were tasks that I felt like could be delegated, but my team was having a hard time doing all of it. So that meant that everyone was working extra hours to accomplish some of these additional goals that we have.
Where did you want to focus your time in? Where did you want to apply your mental energy towards?
I think the discovery process with clients is really, really fun. So being able to have those, let's tell the story of the financial statements, that's like really, really a fun place to be able to spend time. And whenever we're bogged down with the work, it's really difficult to be able to do that fun game with the clients.
Is the work that you're having to do with those clients imperative for the part that you love? And how important is it from a standpoint of what you do with that to have the information a certain way?
So let me think about that answer. So I think that the basics have to be completed in order for us to be able to move forward into more complex areas and time with the client. Does that answer your question?
It does. And the time with the client, is that time with the client important for you having time with the client, or for those people who are doing that particular work with the client to get it the way that you need to have it?
Preferably the team have time with the client. I think there's going to be times where I want to be able to touch base with my clients. I want to be able to spend that connective time with them, so that way they know that I'm still around. But I'd rather spend it with them in quality time to maybe think about their own tech stacks, maybe think about, their own hiring issues, instead of trying to ask them what this uncategorized transaction is.
And one more question for you. Why, when you think about where you wanted to head, how important was it for you to get to where this new place you wanted to be at? Is it really important, or is it somewhat important? Could you continue doing how you've done it today? Or is this more of a burning bridge?
I think I was exhausted. And for me, I didn't want to continue to spin my wheels in an area that I wasn't able to get any traction. So I had to do something different. And it was okay if it was a fail, but I was in that spot where this wasn't working anymore.
Got it. So what you all saw there was that's about 5 minutes of time that we just spent going back and forth. You'll notice that I didn't actually add anything to really the conversation. All I was doing was taking the information that she gave, and I tried to go down different pathways for her to be able to get more information out, to then be more convicted or clear on what she wanted or where she needed to go. It seemed like when we were going down this path, Liz, that you had made up your decision that you were going to go, you needed to have a different way of working. And therefore you had to have some way to make that happen. You felt like you had been burned on the hiring. And so really the only question really was where to outsource, not how to outsource. And whether or not that was an outsource or insource is what I call it, people on your team that are from somewhere else, or you've just pushed the work all out. But we hadn't gotten to that point of the conversation. We would have to spend quite a bit more time, because there was an importance of the client that you brought up around the servicing of that and the face time that's required. And that really is going to be the thing that you are going to have to sort out on your path forward, but you've already made the decision on the path being that direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Did everyone follow that? And that went really back to, if you look back to what we were doing here, it was these probing questions and that driving in to understand the why. And so you all have the capability, because you all come from a world like you talked about, where you wanted to actually spend all your time, Liz, which was really on discovery and working with clients. It's no different than what we're doing there. It's just all about active listening and probing. Any comments from everybody here, either on the chat or Liz or Heather, before we go into the second half of this?
I think everybody's processing. This is sometimes whenever you say things out loud and you make it a habit, that's whenever you start to say, aha, I want to do this. I want to spend this time thinking about what is the best decisions, but dedicating that time. You said it was 5 minutes, and that was great to be able to hop on a call with a buddy. And that maybe that's part of this group here, is that tag team with somebody, and to be able to have this call back and forth, because you can be each other's partners in this sense.
That's right. And Tiffany brought up a good point. She's like, you have to be careful not to pose leading questions. If anybody was there, was quite astute, they would have noticed that my last question was a leading question. And the only reason why I asked that one is I needed to wrap it up. I should have spent longer probing, but I moved it forward. I even told you, I said, you have to choose one or the other. It was a burning bridge. Is that true? That's because I was getting to the end where I had to move forward. But I probably shouldn't have addressed it that way. So Tiffany is right on the ball. Okay.
She usually is.
Go ahead.
Just saying. Tiffany is usually right on the ball.
Okay, we're going to go in the second half of this because I want to get to the science part, and this is where it's super interactive. Never done this before. We're going to make it work. Okay.
Got it.
So I'm excited about this. This is either one of those moments of total great innovation or massive failure, but we'll find out. So I want you all, we're going to go through this whole science, but the first thing is we need to kind of know what our problem space is going to be. So we put up a polling question here, which is, if you had your choice to focus on a new service line or area of your firm where you wanted to go and start to build out, what would be the area of focus that you would want to go down? I've listed the top 7 services plus 3 kind of new ones there at the bottom. You get to pick your own adventure. We're going to take the top 3 that come out of this. So while you're looking at that poll and dealing with it, I'm going to keep talking and take us through how do we do this. So the science of picking and choosing is relatively about going broad to narrow, broad to narrow. If any of you had done the Intuit Design for Delight, it's kind of in the same sort of vein. And so we're going to try to take and keep narrowing down until we can get to how we're able to get to a small set of things to choose from and then properly evaluate them. So this can be used for things that generally are a defined list that you are ultimately trying to narrow down to a singular answer. So that's probably the easiest way to define it. So everything's got 10 steps today. So we'll go ahead and I'll go through my 10 steps. The first is you have to identify the problem space. We already did this. I defined it already for you, saying, hey, we wanted to look at a service line that maybe we want to add. Okay. The second step of this is, and this is an example, I use this for processes, so just bear with me. We're going to migrate it back to the service line bit. But a lot of times you may not know what your problem space is. You might just know that you've got a problem. And that problem I just showed before was tax season. I never want to have a tax season like this last one. I know we're just entering the new one. But the way to be able to figure out what the process or the space that you want to identify is to use this sort of mechanism here, which was you first, in this case, the process, list out what you do really well and list out the things you don't do really well and see what the recurrence pattern is and be able to get to whatever that space might be. Not going to belabor that one. Okay, let's go to the next one. Whoops. The next one is once you've got the problem space understood, then you want to look and just understand that space in general with whatever information you can get to. So at least you have a point of view and you ultimately can understand how you want to narrow down. So one of the things around with Liz, it was around picking your apps. Which app do I pick? Well, you have to go from, I want a better app that's going to ultimately drive more efficiency. Well, you need to then look at, well, what are all the different categories that might exist within that problem space. So I brought up this example. It shows, it's an old slide from Accountex from the Sleater days, where there are all these different categories you might choose from. Just choosing the whole space is not enough. You need to narrow down, say, okay, I'm looking at this problem in this subcategory. That's where I want to start to do my evaluation of. So for me, I used the example of the car, right? I had to buy my in-laws car. So I said, okay, well, I know he needs a new car, so he wants new. So I got new versus used narrowed. Okay, on the new side, does he want a sedan or an SUV or a truck? Wants an SUV. Okay, fine. Now I've got SUVs narrowed down. That helps. Okay, now I can have something to work on. And so we're constantly doing this narrowing to find a problem space that's containable so that we can get ourselves down to a handful of options, something maybe 6, 10, 12 different players that might exist. Okay. So typically when you're doing that, you might find something that's going to help narrow that even further. In this example for the app one, I just said, hey, look, look to where your core software provider is. Self-serving, maybe that one is Carbon. Love you all if you use Carbon. If not, you should consider it. That's my little side comment there. But which are the ones that maybe pair with it? Most people here use QuickBooks, so maybe it's QuickBooks Online. What is the problems? What are the vendors that sit within that ecosystem? Now you typically can get down to, again, I'll use the car example. I was in SUVs. I can go ahead and look in the SUV size, and he wanted, sort of the medium-sized SUV. And there's really 12 different cars I could choose from. So I've got 12 different vendors that I need to select from. That's a heck of a lot of vendors to select if I'm going to go really, really, really deep in analysis. So I need some way to be able to get through and create a short list. And so we want to create a quick evaluation method by which to do that. So anytime you need to do that, you want to time box it. In this case, give yourself 30 minutes that you might evaluate on any given particular vendor in the space. And so you pick those, and all you do is you say, you know what, I'm going to go look at their websites and look at their reviews. I'm going to look at how they advertise it, what their features are. And I'm actually looking at it from a perspective of not choosing the winner. I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to exclude and what are the things I really care about, because I need that context to be able to frame how I'm going to create my quantitative model in order for me to do my next pass at understanding these particular vendors. And so you're capturing this information, you're learning what are the deal breakers. In my father-in-law's case, he wanted faux wood in the car. That's his thing. He wants faux wood. Turns out there's only like 5 cars that have faux wood in it. So it made my job relatively easy to get down to that. It wasn't how big the engine was. It wasn't how fast it went. It was the faux wood. So there's these different criteria that start to pop up that you care about. So then you want to prioritize those criteria and put them into a given set. You might ideate 8 to 12 different criteria. And so you might do that ideation, and then you want to narrow down to 3 to 5. And so best way to do that is you get yourself a pile of sticky notes like this here, set a timer for 3 minutes. And as you've now gone through this process of understanding the ones you didn't like and things, you start writing down the criteria types. And you write as many as you can within that 3-minute period. And that gets you to a list like this. So this was a list of things that we did for software. I'm going to pick an app. These are the things that I want to consider. And now I need to get this down to a list of 3 to 5. And you can do that. It may be an easy exercise. It may not. If it's a hard exercise, categorize it into high, medium, low, go through the whole list, say, oh, this is really important. This is kind of important. This is not important. And then look at everything that's in the super important and then prioritize those in order. And that'll get you to 3 to 5 right off the bat. So in this case, we narrowed it down to these 4. Now we need to understand their importance. Not everything's weighted the same. And so we need to weight them. So the first step you do on weighting is you ultimately try to rank order them. So you can see which one is the first, second, third, and fourth. In the case of the car example, I knew faux wood was important, but value was really important for him. So value was up at the top. Faux wood was kind of a criteria that just let someone into the game. The other one was roominess, and then aesthetic. And so those then had to give their own weighting score. And so we want to put a weighting value on each one. It's a 100-point exercise. You do not want to have all your criteria be anchored to be the same value. You want to create separation. And so you want to be able to distribute those 100 points across that 3 to 5 evaluation criteria that you have. And I did that here in this particular software one. It was price, workflow, fit, ease of use, reporting. If you don't have a really good sense of the spread, then just delineate them by an even amount. But you do want to know what your first, second, third, fourth most important is. And this is where Heather loves this part of the actual problem, is really around the scoring part of it. You're going to go back to each one of the vendors that you have. Again, you've got 3 to 5 that are going to be able to fit within what you're going to evaluate. You have the weighting of the criteria that are important, and you're now going to go and assess each one of these vendors on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being the best in the world, 1 being the crappiest of the bunch. And you're quickly going to go through the different categories and say, hey, for my first option, how did I do on price? Wasn't that good? Wasn't the best. I gave it a 2. How was it a workflow fit? My second criteria. Well, it stunk. It was the worst. Give it a 1. How was it on ease of use? Pretty good. Give it a 4. Reporting, not so good. And we do that across each vendor. We go look at each one of them as a vendor holistically across their criteria. And we go to the next vendor, do the same thing. Next vendor, do the same thing. You don't have to do a ton of research, additional research here. You don't have to overthink it. The information you have in your gut is actually going to lead you to the right answer. And you don't want to do all the vendors with price once, all the vendors by workflow fit once. You want to do one vendor across the set, then do the next vendor. Otherwise, you will bias what your answer is going to be. And now, as everyone here loves mathematics like I do, you have now created a simple way to take a qualitative thing and make it quantitative. You have a weighting score, you have a 1 to 5 score, and by applying that logically across the weight to each underlying score and adding them together, you have created a composite score by which to evaluate what is going to be your top choice in a completely quantitative way. And so this is how it looks like when you're done. We're actually going to do this together, which is why I'm rushing along. And we have a prioritization template that you can use for anything you want. So you can go ahead and we'll have the slides, you can get to it, but screenshot this. Again, you can get that template at any time and it's all programmed ready to go. So feel free to use that. So Heather, Liz, you ready to do this? Rapid fire approach with the polling questions?
Let's do this. So
Okay.
our top 3, Liz, you want to unveil?
Yeah, so I found it was super interesting. I'm going to go ahead and share the results with everyone so you can see them yourself. But we did have 3 that are our top choices, and strategic advisory was 53%. And then IT consulting and training was 15%, and then fraud examiner was 12%.
Okay. Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and say strategic advisory number 1, IT consulting was number 2, and fraud was number 3, right? Those are our considerations.
That's right. Yes.
And I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to stop when I get a chance, and I'm going to build it in the Excel as we go. Okay.
All
So
right.
what we've done here, going through the example, you can look at the example on your own time. It's what we did for password managers. My lovely buddy Joe Karoof and I did this with some folks. And so last pass at that time won. That was years ago. Might be different now. We are going to ask you all, we did the first piece of this, okay? The first piece of it was we had to get to evaluation criteria. So Heather and Liz and I did this so we wouldn't go around in circles. And we determined that the 3 important criteria to determine a service line was the time that you have to spend towards it, the money that it generates for you, and the alignment to your core values. Okay. Now,
Oh, that's the wrong one, Liz.
yeah, we're just, yep, we got to do this one first.
Yeah, let's do this one. So which criteria? This one here. Okay. I'm going to launch it, Liz. So which?
Yep. Go ahead, Heather.
So we're going to say, so I just launched the poll. It's which criteria is the most important to you and your firm? Is it the time that you would have to invest in being ready to offer the new service line? Is it the money that you'd have to invest to be able to, or the value that it's, or the alignment to your core values? And then that's going to help us determine the weighting of the criteria.
So you all got to vote fast on these. We got to keep it moving. Otherwise, we're never going to get done with the exercise and failed ourselves. So I'll let you guys let us know we can go. And we're going to do rapid fire the next one.
All right. So we have 8 people that haven't voted.
Come on,
so we're
people.
going to count you down. We're going to count you down. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So I'm going to share the results. 47% said value, the alignment to the core values.
Yep.
37% said the time investment, and 17% said the financial investment, the money.
Perfect. We're going to use that as our weighting, everybody. So value is the most important, time is second, money is third. Now, we have already figured out that we're going to consider 3 different options for what we're going to add to our firm. First is strategic advisory, next is IT consulting and fraud. So we're going to go to the next poll. Okay.
Okay. All right. So the
It's
next
going to be a longer poll.
All right. So the next poll is between 1 and 5. So that is, all right. So that is between 1 and 5. How important is this investment of money? And that would
So what
be,
this is, everybody, is we are now considering for strategic advisory, for strategic advisory on its own, how important is this investment of money for that? And how is it high? Is it low? Is the amount We used importance. It's actually the amount that we have to invest. And so if it's a low amount of investment, it's 1. If it's a high amount, if it's a high amount of investment, it is 1. If it's a low amount of investment, it is 5. So the reason is that 5 is the highest scoring one. Anything that's easy, makes us a ton of money, fits perfectly, that's a 5. That makes sense on that, Heather?
Yep.
So 1 is bad, 5 is good. For strategic advisory, across all 3 evaluation criteria lenses, how would you score it as a fit within your practice? 5 is the most important, Dina. Yes.
Wow, this one's fascinating to watch. I can't wait to share the results.
It is fascinating.
It looks like
Yeah.
we only have half of everybody who voted, so this is definitely
Yeah,
more
so-
of a thought process, but go with your gut.
Well, they've got to answer 3 questions too. So they're doing it. We're at 25. So I think 30 people have voted at the first one. So we're almost there, and then we'll close this out. So Ian, what numbers do you need from us? So we have, do you want?
Yeah, I'm just building everything here in the spreadsheet as we go. So I just need,
Oh, okay.
once you get it, I just need the values of each one of those.
Okay. I'm going to count you down, everybody. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So that was for number 1, which was the investment of money. The highest scoring, 53% said that was a 3.
Okay, so we go with that. Time was?
And then 30% said that, well, let's see. So it looks like we have over 50% were between 3 and 5. So let's pick 4 for the
Yep.
time investment time. And then 40% said that it had to align with our core values. So I would say that would be the 5, right? 40% or maybe a 4. I don't know.
We'll give it a 4. Okay, let's go to the next
Okay.
one. We're gonna share the next poll. Next poll is all about IT consulting. Same exercise.
Same question.
Time, money, and value. How much investment is required on this? 1 being a lot, 5 being a little, across the 3 lenses of time, money, and value line.
This is fun.
Go with your gut, everybody. We're gonna count it down. 7,
All right, we've got about 4 more people. We're almost there.
4, 3, 2, 1. What's the scores?
Oh, they're getting faster. All right, we got the 30 who voted. So I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. So it looks like 40% said 3 for the investment of money and 33% said 4. So I would say 3 is probably
3.5 or 4.
for the investment of time. It looks like, wow, it's like the perfect bell curve. So I would say 3.
Okay.
I think you're muted, Ian. I can't hear you.
Nope. So I got 3 and 4. What's the values?
Values,
Weird.
so,
Oh,
the
I guess it must
majority-
be me because I can't hear Liz either. So,
yeah, I think.
and
it
then
is-
for the core values, it looks like it's probably a 4.
Yep.
Okay. Let's go to the next poll. Last poll. This is for fraud examination, correct? Yeah.
All right, cool.
Correct. Yep. That's exactly right.
So let's get the poll up and we're going to do the same activity. We got to keep moving. We only got 2 minutes left. We're almost there.
We're so close. We're so close.
So close.
Everybody's voting really fast. Yes. Thank you. All right. We want to do our countdown?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give me the scores.
All right. So the money is 3. 47% said 3. The time is also 3. And the core values is also 3.
Dun, dun, dun. I love it, everybody. Here we go. You put it in your little spreadsheet, you have your answer. Again, we have our values that we created, we have our weighting that we had scored, and we have our winner, which was strategic advisory. The balance of what you all had decided and what you had come up with tells us that it's a relatively clear winner here. If you have these numbers being relatively close, like again, there was a conversation whether that was a 4 or a 3. Now it starts to get a little bit closer. We would knock out the fraud examiner and we'd start to go and do a little bit deeper dive into these other 2 to make a better decision. But in this case, it was really more clear cut and we could go ahead and pursue that, knowing that we are close enough in understanding using some science here to help us be able to get some clarity. There you all. That is the art and science today.
I love it. I do.
This was fantastic. This was fantastic.
Well, it can be applied to so many different areas of your life.
Oh, it really can. Absolutely.
So for
I love
Tiffany's
it.
point, considering the economic situation, we didn't choose as a criteria the economy as a consideration. If we had, might have changed things, right? So that's the reason
Totally.
where we might have missed a criteria that we might
Right.
want to put in because it's going to change the modeling. So
Awesome. This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. You always bring such a wealth of knowledge to everything that you do. I'm going to stop sharing your screen because I have a couple of slides to throw up. Well, actually, just a couple. All right. Sharing. Okay. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And oops, and I just switched back that. We'll have the slides up on our website tomorrow when we put the recording up. Usually takes us about 24 hours to do that. So those of you that were looking for Ian's list of questions, you'll be able to find that in the slides. And then Ian, as far as how they can contact you, do you want to throw your contact information into the chat? And that way, if folks, and I think we have one poll about carbon. I don't know. Do we have another poll, Liz, for carbon?
We can. Mhm.
Yeah, let's do that. If you would like to learn more about carbon, which is a practice management tool, one of my favorites, go ahead and answer this, and we'll send your information along to Ian. So I know you didn't get a chance to do a demo. We do, by the way, have a demo. We have a couple of demos of carbon on our website. So if you go to our YouTube channel or onto our website, you'll be able to find it. And I think even if you go in and use a little search utility and put in carbon, you should be able to find that recording really, really easily. So awesome. So thank you so much, Ian. Thank you to everyone else for joining us today. This was an awesome, awesome session. Totally different from what we normally do on Happy Hour, but I loved it. I loved it. So next week, we have the amazing Kelly Parks joining us to share her tech stack at Calm Waters Cloud Accounting. This is the second in our Firm Spotlight series, which we're doing in 2023, where we're going to be sharing the tech stacks of successful firm owners. Well, how did they decide the tech that they're using? They're going to reveal the things that are important to them and why they chose what they chose and why it works so well for them. So we're really excited to have Kelly. She is just a bundle of energy and an amazing person. So we love having her on Happy Hour for sure. Then we're going to take a little bit of a break. We might pop a couple episodes in there in the meantime, but we're going to have a campfire chat with Keeper on the 21st of March. We're going to have a campfire chat with Swissnet in April, and then we're going to do our next spotlight with Kelly Gonzalez of Totally Booked. If you would like to be featured on Happy Hour and share your secret sauce, so the tech stack for your firm, we do have a link. Hopefully, Liz, you're on that and you're sharing that out. You can actually fill out a questionnaire. And if you meet the criteria to be coming on Happy Hour, we'll reach out to you and set up a meeting. And we would love to have you come on and share your tech stack with your peers. So fantastic. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again to Ian. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, everyone.